Isaac the Syrian, also known as Isaac of Nineveh, was a 7th century bishop and monk. His life corresponded to the rise of Islam, being born about 610 and dying about the year 700. He was born and lived mostly in the Arabian Peninsula around what is today modern Qatar. He was almost certainly a member of the Syrian Church of the East, or rather the Church of the East, also known as the Nestorian Church commonly, yet he is considered a saint by the Orthodox Church and some Eastern Catholic churches, and in addition to the Church of the East, though he is not recognized universally in the Catholic Church by, for instance, the Roman Church. Our auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, Bishop Robert Barron, has cited Isaac the Syrian for his contention of the possibility of an empty hell. However, Isaac treated hell more like a purgatory where people went to for a period of time, if not most people went to for a period of time. Isaac's hope, rather, was more of an expectation. It was an expectation. He believed everybody would be let out of hell, and not limited to humans, but included Satan and the demons themselves. So it is perplexing why he would cite someone. Isaac absolutely believed people went to hell. He just believed hell got extinguished. Much of this article I will be quoting from Russian Orthodox Bishop Metropolitan Ilarion Alfiev. In his book, The Spiritual World of Isaac the Syrian, published in 2016, Alfiev largely relies on the work of Sebastian Brock, whose own position is that absolutely Isaac the Syrian taught universal reconciliation, the heresy. Concerning Isaac's church, the Church of the East, Metropolitan Alfiev writes in his book, a local council in 585, he's referring to this Nestorian Church's council, confirmed the unshakable authority of Theodore and forbade anyone in open or in secret to defame this doctor of the church or to refute his holy books. Subsequently, two other councils, 596 and 605, condemned Hanana's interpretation and repeated the anathemas against those who refute the commentaries, exegeses, and teachings of the proven teacher, the blessed Theodore the Interpreter, and who attempt to introduce new and strange exegeses replete with folly and blasphemy. The faith of the Church of Persia became the faith of Theodore, or of Theodore and Diodor. Notice the phrase used by the council, the blessed Theodore the Interpreter. Isaac used the same exact phrase when quoting him on universal reconciliation. Diodor of Tarsus, the other name mentioned, though considered a saint by some in the early church, was a universalist in all likelihood also. Isaac's communion openly made Theodore of Mopsuestia their standard and doctor of the church. Nestorius got his Nestorianism largely from Theodore of Mopsuestia. Theodore rejected the term Theotokos too, and he believed Mary was more of an anthropotokos and only indirectly Theotokos. Metropolitan Alfiev also writes, by the mid-7th century, the names of the three teachers, Diodor, Theodore, and Nestorius, were inserted into the diptychs of the Church of the East, and they were commemorated ever since. The Church of the East continues to commemorate Theodore and Diodor after they had been anathematized in Byzantium, and it included the name of Nestorius on the diptychs long after he had been condemned. All of this testifies that the Church of Persia, though not Nestorian in strict theological sense, adhered to the theological and Christological thought, which was rather close to that of Nestorius. So clearly the Church of Isaac the Syrian was fairly close theologically to Nestorius himself, and considered him a saint and a teacher, along with Theodore of Mopsuestia. Isaac the Syrian held the writings of Theodore of Mopsuestia in high regard, as indicated in the following quote taken from the second part that was discovered in the 1980s by Sebastian Brock, and is translated here by Sebastian Brock. Anyone who likes can turn to the writings of the blessed Interpreter, a man who had his sufficient fill of the gift of grace and who was entrusted with the hidden mysteries of the Scriptures, enabling him to instruct on the path to truth the whole community of the Church, who above illumined us Orientals with wisdom, nor is our mind's vision capable enough to bear the brilliancy of his compositions, inspired by the divine spirit. From the blessed Theodore the Interpreter, after other luminous statements, he says, and this is taken from Brock's work, Ascetic Homilies, Isaac of Nineveh, the second part, chapter 4 through 41. Some Orthodox apologists have attempted to claim the second part is not actually authentically Isaac the Syrian and have dubbed it Pseudo-Isaac, but some other, and insist it was written by another heretic, or possibly even another Isaac mistaken for their Isaac the Syrian, as they claim there's multiple Isaac the Syrians. This is the article by John Senidopoulos, claiming that Abba Isaac the Syrian was unjustly condemned. However, even if we were to take Isaac's writings before the rediscovery of the second part by Brock, it is evident Isaac was a heretic, even if we consult only his first part. Some universalists even suggested Isaac was one of them by Isaac's statements about hell, though not as explicit as the second part we have now. The first part, Isaac still quoted Theodore Mopsuestia, calling him the blessed interpreter there too, stating in the following: concerning all these things, one may be well instructed in particulars from the writings of the blessed Bishop Theodore, the light of the whole world. For he speaks about the kind and the rank of revelation, especially of the 3 volumes on Genesis and the 2 volumes of Job, and in the last one about the 12 prophets, and in the commentaries of the Acts and the Gospel of Matthew. This is taken from the Mystic Treatise 19 on revelations and powers, which happens to the saints and images, found on page 105 through 106, and you can click here for the book itself on archive.org. And again, he calls him blessed, referring to him again, says as the blessed commentator denotes in his commentaries on the story in the Acts. And then, of course, referencing the same commentaries referenced up here, then says the same thing about Job, also referencing it again. Considering the commentaries, now going back to Theodore Mopsuestia, again, venerated by Isaac the Syrian as a great scholar and doctor and saint. Whereas Isaac the Syrian stated he was blessed, illumined, and so on, an ecumenical council actually strongly stated the contrary. The Second Council of Constantinople, which gathered in the year 553, issued the sentences against the 3 chapters, which says, first we consider Theodore Mopsuestia. When all of his blasphemies and his works were exposed, we were astonished at God's patience, that the tongue and the mind which had formed such blasphemies were not straightway burned up by divine fire. We would not even have allowed the official reader of these blasphemies to continue. Such were our fear of the anger of God at even the rehearsal of them, since each blasphemy was worse than the one before in the extent of the heresy, and shook to their foundation the minds of their listeners. If it had not been the case that those who reveled in these blasphemies seemed to us to require the humiliation which their exposure would bring upon them, all of us, angered by the blasphemies against God, burst into attacks and anathemas against Theodore. During and after the reading, as if he had been living and present there, we said, Lord, be favorable to us. Not even the demons themselves could have dared to speak such things against you. This can be read. I'll post the link later. The voluminous amount of contempt for Theodore Mopsuestia was too much to even quote. There are so many instances of it in the council, but the council stated that he is anathema, stating again in that same section, consequently we anathematize the aforementioned 3 chapters, that is, the heretical Theodore Mopsuestia, along with his detestable writings. Initially, the Pope was hesitant to condemn Theodore himself and merely wanted to condemn his heretical theology, as he had died long ago and was pretty much considered orthodox at his time. but eventually relented. The council themselves, if you continue to read on, actually suggest that Theodore, among others, that it's condemning, are separated from God posthumously and defended the practice. Going back to Bishop Alfiev, he mentions that uh, Isaac the Syrian also depended on another doctor or writer called Agravius. According to Brock, Isaac's style, phraseology, and terminology owes a great debt to a particular writer, John the Solitary and Evagrius. Isaac mentions Evagrius by name and many times quotes from him. As we see here, here's some instances. Isaac calls, also, sometimes his name is also pronounced Euagrius. So Isaac here calls him the sage among the saints, blessed. He says in the first part, Mystic Treatise number 8, what is it that helps a man to come near? Stating the following, and the following word has been said by the sage among the saints, Mare Euagrius, who did everything which he did with a purpose. Prayer is a joy that gives place to thanksgiving. Then again, he states in 62 of the Mystic Treatise, the blessed Euagrius has well said, "A clear way is founded upon mercy." Then he quotes it again. He calls them all again blessed, and then later in 74 again calls them blessed. Yet, according to the Third Ecumenical Council, 680 through 681, the prior Council of Constantinople in 553 was in part also condemned Evagrius. Now remember, 680 through 681, Isaac the Syrian was still alive at this time, and he would die many years after this council convened. But of course, he was never a member of the church, so he didn't care for what this particular council had to say. But going to the council, the Third Council of Constantinople in 680, Exposition of Faith says, "Wherefore this holy and universal synod of ours, driving afar the error of impiety which endured for some time and even till the present, following without deviation in the straight path after the holy and acceptable fathers, has piously accorded in all things with the 5 holy and universal synods, that is to say, with," and then it goes through and lists the synods, and then number 5, the previous one, Constantinople II as we call it, the 5th Holy Synod, the latest of them, which was gathered here against Theodore Mopsuestia, Origen, Didymus, and Evagrius, and the writings of Theodoret against the 12 chapters of the renowned Cyril, and the letter said to have been written by Ibis to Mari the Persian. Bishop Alfiev explains how the Orthodox Church actually became to recognize Isaac the Syrian as a saint. It happened hundreds of years after the fact. So remember, Isaac the Syrian died about the year 700 as an historian. So Bishop Ilarion says, by the 11th century, the Greek translations of his writings made Isaac widely known in the Greek-speaking East. In his famous anthology of the ascetical texts, the Evergetion, passages from Abba Isaac the Syrian stand on the same footing as those of the classics of early Byzantine spirituality. This is how a modest Nestorian bishop from a remote part of Persia became a holy father of the Orthodox Church of the Chalcedonian orientation. That alone should speak volumes. It was many years after the fact, so probably 3-4 centuries of complete ignorance about Isaac the Syrian, or by and large ignorance of Isaac the Syrian, and his writings got snuck in, and he got venerated as a saint subsequent to that. So how can he conclude from reading Metropolitan and Hilarian's book and from Isaac's veneration of the heretic Theodore Moswetsky and Evagrius that Isaac was indeed Orthodox? He wasn't. The most perplexing thing about all of this, about the canonization by some of Isaac the Syrian is his veneration of a formerly condemned heretic, uh, of rather heretics and doctrines, at a time after a council ruled against the heretics and their heresies. Ironically, those condemned by the Second Council of Constantinople were long dead. They were condemned after the death as heretics and anathematized, though in life they were presumed to have died within the church. While on the other hand, Isaac the Syrian was on the opposite end and venerated, being known only after hundreds of years after his death, despite his heresy and rejection of an ecumenical council's rulings. How is such a blatant heretic a saint? How can bishops such as Robert Barron cite Isaac the Syrian as a legitimate source? The Second Council of Constantinople, contrary to what is commonly believed, seems to suggest heretics anathematized posthumously by it, including Theodore of Mopsuestia and Agravius, died, quote, separated from the church. In other words, damned to hell. So much for reasonable hope.